And by the way, if either of you would like to have your talk on the main OWASP, would do that as well.
Yeah, I will let you know, Sharif. Let's see if the stream works first.
Sam, it works. We're live, but I can't see the slides anymore.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, looks like that we're live. Yeah, welcome everyone. Let's give me a second so I can start sharing my screen.
No, it's okay.
Okay, excellent. Welcome everyone. Welcome to OWASP London chapter online meeting. We've been offline for a while, but that was due to coronavirus. We waited and waited and waited, but looks like we will continue our meetups online for a while. Agenda for tonight is we're going to have a warm greeting and OWASP updates about events and projects around OWASP. Then we're going to have Siobhan presenting a talk on open source intelligence and how to get started. There will be a time for Q&A, and then we will move on to Grayson's talk on how to detect complex code patterns using semantic grep. And then there will be a Q&A session as well. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sam Stepanyan. I'm one of OWASP London chapter leaders. We have Andrew Letts and Sharif Mansour online as well. My co-leaders, you can see our Twitter handles on the screen now. The hashtag for tonight's event is OWASP London. You can follow us on Twitter at OWASP London. And if you want to tweet about tonight's event, please use our hashtag. So who is OWASP? OWASP is a worldwide free and open community focused on improving security of application software. So our mission is to make application security visible so that people and organizations can make informed decisions about application security risks. It is all for free. Everyone is free to participate in OWASP, and all of our materials are available under a free and open software license. And all OWASP events, except conferences, are free to attend by both members and non-members of OWASP, and can be attended by anyone who is interested in application security and cybersecurity in general. So OWASP Foundation is a global non-profit charitable organization. We are a vendor neutral community. We are supported by vendors, but we're vendor neutral. Collective wisdom of the best minds of application security worldwide. That's what we are. If you're looking for any application security resource, you will find OWASP as a mothership of all the information, documentation, tools, and projects on application security. We provide free tools, free guidance, documentation. All meetings are free to attend, and our meetings are usually 2-hour seminars. When we were back in pre-COVID-19 world, we'd have free drinks and food, which would be included for in-person events. Yes, so looking forward to times when we can be meeting in person again. So we're all volunteers, and there are 45,000 plus volunteers worldwide. There are over 200 local chapters of OWASP in 56 countries and counting. We have a membership, so we are a membership supported organization, but you don't have to be a member to participate. We highly encourage you to become a member. Individual membership costs $50 per year. We also have a student membership, which is discounted. Also, you will find that individual membership will be discounted for some countries of the world as well. And you can also become a corporate supporter or a sponsor of OWASP. So OWASP members have various benefits, but OWASP members will support ethics and principles of the OWASP Foundation. You will underscore your awareness of application security. You will increase your value, knowledge, and expand your skills. Network with like-minded professionals. Collaborate on projects. If you become a member, you will also get exclusive discounts on various application security conferences in EU and USA, and many other global cybersecurity conferences and events. So your membership fee is actually a donation. So that means you will also donate to your local chapter and projects. You will also get as a benefit an OWASP.org email address. And of course, one of the main benefit of membership is that you get to vote on issues that shape direction of OWASP community. And another cool thing, you will get this laptop sticker if you become a member. And you can become a member by going to OWASP.org/membership. So on this slide, you can see various corporate supporters of OWASP, our sponsors. And if you would like to see your logo here, please get in touch with us and or visit OWASP.org/supporters to find out how you can support OWASP Foundation. We also have our local chapter supporters, and the companies you see on the screen kindly provided the office space for our meetings or donated to our chapter. And again, if you would like to donate and support OWASP London, you can have your logo displayed here on this slide. Briefly about upcoming global events, I am sad to inform you that OWASP Global AppSec in Dublin has been cancelled because of COVID-19 restrictions. There will be a different global event, which is currently now being planned online. In terms of the actual in-person conferences, I believe due to coronavirus restrictions, the only part of the world where they're allowed to happen is going to be New Zealand at the moment. So we have upcoming OWASP Lightning Conference, which will be online on January 20th. And this is all going to be fast-paced 90 minutes demos and talks. And then we will have a rerun of our Summer of Security event that we had last year. So we will be bringing back all the virtual training courses. And if you missed our wonderful event last year, we had three conferences in 2020 with virtual training. So we will be doing a rerun in January again. So you can join and learn application security from the best trainers. Another event that we had last year was OWASP Chapters All Day. That happened in June last year, and we had wonderful event with 24 hours of talks from 24 different OWASP chapters all around the world. We're having a rerun of this in January, February, date to be confirmed. This event was hugely successful. All the talks are currently live, and you will be able to find them on YouTube. If you look for OWASP Chapters All Day channel, you will find 24 talks published there. News about OWASP board election results. We had a board election last month. The results been announced. So the new board members will be Martin Knobloch, Bill Corey, and Jobin Jabari, who will be starting their term from January 2021. Briefly about OWASP projects. So OWASP currently has 189 projects, including 20 flagship projects. You will find them if you go to owasp.org/projects. This is the list of flagship projects. The list gets updated all the time. Do please check out all the new ones. I will tell you about the new project very soon, because it is actually related to one of today's talk. But there are new projects going live almost every month, and all our projects need contributors. And of course, we have not just the OWASP Top 10, we have other documentation projects and tools and guidelines projects, which will help you to be more secure. And also we have projects which will help you to learn security. So for example, projects like Security Shepherd and Secure Flag will let you run secure training in your organizations. So this is a newer project in OWASP called OWASP Miriam. It's very relevant to tonight's first talk. That is an open source intelligence framework, and it is based on Recon NG core, written in Python. So what it will allow you to do, it will extract emails, documents, subdomains, social networks from search engines. It will also help you to extract links, CSS, JavaScript files, and keywords from web sources. You can also find and brute force DNS, top-level domains, and some important directories and files. It will also let you crawl web pages and search using regular expressions. It will also help you identify web applications or application firewalls, as well as interesting and important files if you are doing your open source intelligence investigations. Go ahead and check it out. It's called OWASP Miriam. You will find it under owasp.org/projects. Okay, so today, in order to ask questions, you have two options. Either use our YouTube chat if you are watching this talk on YouTube and you have a YouTube account. There's also an alternative to use a slide.do website, slide.do/OWASP, where you can ask your question anonymously, and we'll make sure all your questions are voiced and asked. Okay, so now it's time for our first talk, and I'm going to present Siobhan Kelleher. So Siobhan comes from the educational sector, and she's been in IT for over 8 years, and she worked in both government and corporate environments before joining higher education sector. Previously, she worked in business to business, where open source intelligence and social engineering skills were vital to creating sales leads and closing deals. So she carried her knowledge into creating into information security world, which helps her educate end users on vulnerability to social engineering attacks, which also comes in handy when building out the holiday card list. So there you go. You can also follow Siobhan on Twitter @SecureCoffee. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Siobhan, and it's going to be all yours. I will make you a co-presenter so you could share your screen. 1 second. Okay. Okay, Siobhan, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. There we go. All right. It's always good when everything shows up on the right screen.
Yes, yes. Same problem here. We can see a screen.
Okay, good.
Welcome. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Siobhan Kelleher, and I am a senior security analyst, and I work in higher ed. Before I moved into higher ed, I had a pretty successful sales career, and I learned a lot about OSINT and social engineering while I was doing that. And I didn't realize that's what it was called at the time, because you just use it to, make sales. When I moved into information security, I realized that I can use this not just for cases, but also for fun, and also for competing in CTFs and other things like that. So what I want to do is share with you some of the tools and resources that I use to get started with OSINT, specifically geared towards finding people. So while I was working in sales, I learned how to research my targets so that I could create curated sales pitches for them by incorporating things that were important to them. It's important to make that personal connection with the person you're trying to sell things to. So I found these things by using OpenSource Intelligence, or OSINT, to research the business and the key decision makers. I was looking for things like how much money did the company make last year, how many employees, what technology do they have? And when I was researching the key decision makers, I was looking for ways to open a conversation and make a personal connection with them. So who were they? What did they like? What were they more likely to listen to from a pitch perspective? How could I connect to them? What were their favorite sports teams? Do they have pets? Did they have a hobby? Anything I could use to build that bridge with them to get to the sale. That was my job. Those skills translated really well into security, and I use them now to help find people. So if you're looking for someone who maybe sent a malicious email to one of your users, or are looking to help educate users on their risks in your awareness training programs, OSINT can be really helpful as well. The term open source intelligence, or OSINT, describes a type of information and how it's used. Basically, it's any type of information available to the public, even if it's behind a paywall, that's used for intelligence, research, or recon. How that information is used can vary quite a bit. OSINT's used by journalists, it's used by intelligence professionals, red teamers and blue teamers use it, librarians, and so many more. It's an incredibly broad field. OSINT is an important component of any threat intelligence operation. So it's a really good skill to grow and a great technique to add to your security team's skills. We all use open source intelligence every day, from personal things like looking up a phone number, finding an address, checking to see if that ex from high school is still on Facebook. I'm kidding, don't use it to stalk people. And to our jobs, where I'll look up maybe a potentially malicious IP or a file hash. I might look up systems using Shodan, or I might research APT behavior. The topic I'm going to cover today is just one small portion of how OSINT can actually be used. The skills, oops, I'm still on the same page. There we go. The skills we use to research threats in our environment are very similar to the skills used to find people. If you're like me and you enjoy looking for needles in haystacks, you may enjoy OSINT research. There's a vast amount of information available out there for people, about people for free. Their likes, their dislikes, their habits, where they live, where they work, and more. Most of us in security are familiar with the idea of OPSEC, or operational security, and keeping our information secure from bad actors. The average user is not, and they often leave a wealth of information scattered all over the internet. As security professionals, we understand how bad actors use this information to attack users and their companies. So how am I using OSINT, and how could you use OSINT? Some of the examples of how I use OSINT in my professional life are as part of user awareness training. I'm not going to cover user awareness training too much in this talk, but it is really important to understand that anything that we can find, threat actors can also find. So open source information can be used to profile an employee and craft a very highly effective spear phishing campaign, or it could be used to attempt to breach their accounts. There's a scene in Mr. Robot, and if you haven't watched Mr. Robot yet, I highly recommend watching it, where Elliot, the main character, is trying to gain access to a target's account. He looks at their social media profile for words to use in a dictionary attack to crack the target's password. He's able to gain information like their favorite sports team, their address, their pet's name, and so on. Helping users understand how accessible their personal information is and how their personal information could be used maliciously helps protect not only their personal accounts, but also their business accounts. So I'm not saying you should run a full OSINT search on your end users. That's a bad idea. But having a discussion with them about the types of records that are out there and how they could be used is important. Additionally, there have been times where I've used OSINT in my job to track external malicious email or usernames. Personally, I like to use my knowledge of OSINT to help find missing people by participating in OSINT CTFs. I've also used it to assist in domestic abuse cases. The investigations are very similar. You want to find what information is out there about your target or your victim. Generally, you're going to look at things like public records, social media, and a general web search to see what's on major search engines. Occasionally, you might look at things like credential dumps, and as much of the internet's not accessible from a major search engine, you may want to see what's available on the deep or the dark web. This is a very busy but a very helpful infographic, and the makers are listed in the bottom corner. Here they've broken down common types of OSINT by category. So social media, social images, internet searches, geodata, blogging, and so on. Sometimes when I get stuck, I will refer to this. When we're looking for people, we're focused on things that person might interact with. So for example, unless your target is a jet setter, you probably won't be looking at any aviation data. You're likely to start with a small amount of information about a person, like their name and where they live, or maybe just a username or an email address. For the most part, you want to look at things like image searches, email, social media, and public records. These are the most common sources I use when I'm looking for people. Once I was working on finding information for a missing child as part of a CTF, where I was able to pivot off the child's Facebook account to her sibling's account and get a lead on where she could potentially be. The way I did that was through a really simple Google search. I found the grandfather's obituary. Obituaries are a great resource, and they often list the first and last name of all the family members, sometimes with their locations. I took those names and I searched them on social media until I found her sister's account. On her sister's account, there was a recent picture of her, her sister, and a boy. By digging into the boy, I was able to find that she had recently been with him, and I was able to submit that information to be included in the investigation package. Before we get too into the fun OSINT tools, we should talk about organization. The amount of data that's available is really vast and it can be very overwhelming. It's not uncommon for me to have upwards of 100 browser tabs open between different machines, and it gets really difficult to remember where you are if you get lost or if you get interrupted. There are lots of tools available to help organize your investigations. Some of them are paid and some of them are free. I like to use free things whenever possible. Mind mapping is a really great tool to help keep you organized. There are tons of templates out there to help you get started, and using them can be really helpful to remind you of what it is you need to look for next. Most commonly, I use Excel, and for long-term investigations, I may also use Trello or a similar tool to help track artifacts. It's important to take good notes on everything you find and how you found it. This helps when you go to hand off the data for the investigation. It's also a requirement for a CTF, and generally it's just a good practice. At a minimum, using a tabs manager like Session Buddy or something like that can be really helpful, and it allows you to save all your open tabs as a collection, which is really great if you have to get up and walk away from the investigation and come back to it later. So this is a mind map that I really like, and it's a really great tool anytime you have a large project to help keep you organized. But specifically, I like to use it for OSINT because you can put in links to everything that you're looking for. This one here was created by a member of the OSINT community. It works with Xmind, which does have a free version. This map is really nice because it has links built into it and you can customize them based on what it is that you're looking for. But it'll help you remember to look for each item, like the usernames, the email addresses, and where to look so that you don't miss something or skip something that could gain you points. If mind mapping seems a little bit too intense to start with, Excel is a really simple option. This is an example of how I might lay out an Excel sheet for an investigation. I like to keep things really streamlined, really easy to see. The title with the name of the missing person at the top, and a link to their missing persons poster or any additional information I might have, and then columns to track what I found, where I found it, and the evidence to support it. If I'm tracking a user from an email address or a username, then I just put that at the top instead of the missing persons poster. When I'm doing a longer investigation, I use Trello to organize my information. Inside each card, I can attach artifacts, or if they're of an extremely sensitive nature, I can make a note of where I've stored them. I can also capture notes inside the cards, which is really helpful. It's important to track your work for many reasons. The biggest reason is that it's helpful when you hand this off to investigation organizers. They need to have a clear understanding of what you're giving them and how you found it, so it can be included in the investigation package that will be handed over to authorities. If the information is for a CTF, you have to provide your evidence in order to get your points. And it doesn't matter if you're investigating a missing person or a sender of a malicious email, if this is for your job or if it's for a CTF. In any case, they're going to want to know how you came to the conclusion. So always back up your work with evidence. And also never underestimate the usefulness of a good bound notebook for jotting things down quickly. I always have an investigation notebook with me, regardless of whether or not I'm doing an investigation for work or an investigation for a CTF. It just helps keep things organized. So tools. Maltego is a really great resource to help you organize artifacts, but also find and link artifacts. They have a really great community edition for personal use that's free. It has built-in tools to harvest people-specific information like networking activity, email addresses, phone numbers, and so on through an API. It does take some work to get it set up if you want to hook up the additional APIs, but it's not a lot of maintenance after you get it initially set up. You can input something like an email address and run what they call a transform on it, and it will return linked accounts like what you see in the picture here. Running transforms in Maltego will reveal your IP address, so it's important that you use a VPN when you're using this tool. The tool can save a lot of time, but it can also throw you down rabbit holes if you don't stay focused on what you're looking for. It does come pre-installed with Kali, and you do need to set up a Community Edition account to fully use the program. Sometimes Google is an easier way to go. And if you're familiar with Google dorking, it's a lot faster when you're trying to get exactly what you're looking for. Tools sometimes fail, so it's important to have that backup plan. For example, Maltego's Twitter transform doesn't work right now, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to bring it back up again. So if you wanted to get something from Twitter, you can do a Google dork. Say, for example, I wanted to look up malware. I would put into Google site twitter.com and then the in-text malware, and it will return every public tweet with the word malware in it. While you could just Google Twitter and the word malware, that's going to return everything that has to do with Twitter and malware. This dork will return just what's found on twitter.com as opposed to everywhere else. You can use this with any website. So you could use it with Facebook, you can use it with other social media sites, anything that's publicly available, you can insert into where it says twitter.com. So you could put facebook.com and in-text malware and it would do the same thing. So another resource that I use is the OSINT framework. This is a really good place to start if you're looking for resources and how to find websites to use for searches. You can use it to look up all kinds of different artifacts. As you open the topics, you'll find links to websites. You can run searches on different types of things. People often use the same or similar usernames across multiple platforms. So this resource can really come in handy if you hit a dead end or just don't know where to start. One of the missing children cases I worked as part of a CTF. Their Facebook account was really locked down, so I couldn't see what they had posted and wasn't getting much off friends and family members. This is becoming increasingly more common with younger people as they move away from Facebook in favor of other social media sites. I was able to find their Instagram account by searching the username on Namecheck. It's a link off of the OSINT framework. Their Instagram account was public and more recently active, which led to a new list of friends and associations I was able to include in the investigation. There are also links to dark web search tools. If you're going to use these, you're going to need a Tor browser, and I strongly recommend you use a VPN. As a short side story, I was researching a case that involved revenge pornography a while back, and I started digging around on the dark web to see if I could find any additional accounts or images that had been posted by the bad actor. And through a series of links, I found myself, regrettably, in a very bad place. So it's important to make sure you take notes, just in case for any reason I ever had to explain why I ended up there. So I pre-recorded my demos, and I have a little video showing how to use the framework.
Excellent. So Siobhan, can you explain what is happening here? You're drilling down into the tree to look for someone using username, right?
Oh, sorry. Is there no audio?
No, we
video?
don't hear the audio, unfortunately. Probably you're not sharing it. Yeah, that's why.
Okay.
You'll need to talk us through.
Yeah. Okay. So what's happening here is when you go into, how do I mute it so that I don't hear it? There we go. All right, so when you go into the OSINT framework, there's lots of different options that you can click on that will give you different information. Let me just switch to live. Okay, so when you go into the OSINT framework, there's lots of different links here that will give you all kinds of different information. There's training information in the bottom. There's information about keeping yourself safe. If you look down, there's some dark web and some other information down here. I'm going to show you usernames. So if you click in username, you can click into username search engines, and then you can click into any one of these. They're all pretty good. I just happen to be partial to name check. And then you can type in the username that you're looking for and then search it, just like you would just a regular Google search. It takes a couple seconds to come back, and then you'll get a list down here at the bottom of all the different accounts. So green is where the username is available, so it's not being used. The dimmed, like Pastebin, Trip, Roblox, you'll see here, those are unavailable, which means that the username has been used there. If you're getting yellow back, then that means that that particular style of username is not available with that, so it's an invalid username for that. And then red just means that there's an error. It could be with this page or it could be with the other page. So it's really simple and easy to use. Okay. So Spiderfoot is another tool that I use. It's really cool and it has quite a few capabilities. I'm going to cover how I use it for investigations. There's two versions. There's a free version that's web-based, and then there's a downloadable open source version. I tend to use the web-based version because I'm using this when I'm doing CTFs and I'm not looking up a whole lot of different things and I don't need an extensive search. But if you want a long search or an extensive search, or you're going to be using it frequently, then it makes sense to use the open source downloadable version. There is a paid version as well, but unless you're going to incorporate OSINT in this way into your security platform, it doesn't necessarily make sense to pay for it. The free version will get you everything that you need. So I come into Spiderfoot. When you can see that I've run scans before, if I want to run a new scan, it's really simple. I just hit the plus button over here. Before we run the new scan, I'll give you a quick run through. With the free version, you can't use the investigate or the monitor, and it does have a lot of limitations. But if you're just using it for a CTF, or you're just using it to find a malicious email or something like that, then you don't need all the extra things necessarily. So I'm going to call this one test, and you put in your scan target. Down here, you can change your iterations. You can add and remove modules. If you were going to scan a corporate target using this, you may want to pay attention to the items that are loud and would set off alarms on their end. And then there's options down here for getting an email when it's done or running correlations. You'll see on the right here that I don't have any APIs configured. It's because I don't pay for the program, so I can't configure APIs. If you use the open source or you pay, then you can configure APIs. And then over here, you'll see that you get 3 scans a month. You get 1 target per scan. And there is a limit for how long the scan will run. So to run the scan, I just hit run now. It's pretty simple. You'll get a notification that the scan is successfully started, and then you'll get the spinning notification up here on the right-hand side that the scan has started. It'll start to come back and populate information down here. So I've run this scan before, so we can go back to the scan section and open it. So this is a SOC account that I don't use too much, so it doesn't come up with a whole lot of things that it's founded in. But there's a couple different things that I want to highlight. And one of them is the node graph. If you're doing an investigation that's going to result in some kind of a presentation, or you need to hand something off to someone, this is a really nice graphic to include. It kind of shows you the account and then everywhere else that it was found, which is really nice. You can click into these and it will open up more information about where it's founded. And you can do the same with the graphs on the first page. It is important to note that just because it found an account with the same username does not mean that this account belongs to the person that we're looking for. So you'll want to remember that you need to look into the account and kind of use a little bit of your investigation knowledge to determine whether or not the account looks like it belongs to the person that you're looking for, or if it might not be theirs. And that's just kind of a gut feeling. Sometimes you can't really get a solid answer on that. And sometimes you can get a very solid answer. You can link it back to other accounts as well. Okay, so now you have breached passwords from running your Spiderfoot scans, hopefully. And where can you go to get the passwords for the breached account? There's lots of different places you can go. There's lots of places in the dark web you can go to get breached passwords. There's a couple places on the, on the normal web where you can go. My favorite resource is the Scylla project. This is run by a researcher that I know, and he's put together the page. It's free to use. It doesn't require an account. You can hook it through an API if you want to, so you can query it that way instead of accessing the page directly. His goal is to make the sale of breach data obsolete by posting it as quickly as he can. So it kind of takes the power away from the bad actors, hopefully. And this data can be really helpful for investigators to have. It is important to mention, though, once you have a username and a password, that doesn't mean you should go log into the account. You should put it aside and make sure you hand it off to the investigators who are going to take the case over from you. For reverse image searching, there's lots of different tools you can use. I tend to use Tenai because if you use Google Images, you get a really broad set of results back. For example, if you search a picture of something that's round and yellow, you'll get everything that ever existed that was round and yellow, whereas Tenai, you might get a more specific answer back. And I typically use reverse image searches wherein I don't know where to start, if I'm striking out everywhere, or if I've finished the end of my investigation, things are starting to really run cold and I want to see if I can just get a few more things. Some of the things to think about is pictures on people's social media sites. You can run those to see if someone else has the same picture on their site to link accounts together. Pictures from the missing person poster, you can try running those as well. Those sometimes are taken by family members and exist on their social media sites. So when you search them, those will come back sometimes. So sometimes what we're looking for is really easy to find, and tools like Spiderfoot and Maltego are overkill. More often than not, I start out with a really simple Google search looking for Facebook accounts or Twitter accounts or anything else I can get with the person's name on it and their hometown or just their email address. And then from there, I dig into their social media accounts by logging into one of my SOC accounts. And I am going to talk about SOC accounts in just a moment. So an example of this is one of my end users received a very inappropriate email with racist and threatening content personally directed at them and their family. The person sending the email used a Proton account, which is commonly done when someone wants to hide who they are. Fortunately for me and unfortunately for them, they used the same username on another account that had just enough information to track it back to them. I was able to use a username search site to track down their other accounts. I found their blog. From their blog, they had linked their Facebook page. And on their Facebook page, I was able to find their name, their address, and then link it to additional accounts with similar racist messages. So I had a really nice package when I handed that off to the police. Following OPSEC is really important when you are doing OSINT work, when you're finding people. Because of the nature of the sites you will use, like Facebook and Twitter, if you use your personal account, it will show that information to the person that you're looking at. So you don't want your personal account to be exposed to potentially bad actors. We don't know who the people are. We don't know why they've gone missing. They could have been abducted. They could be in abusive situations. We don't know. And you don't want that situation coming back to your personal life. In the case of the malicious email, I already know that this person is unstable, and I do not want them coming after me and my family. And additionally, we don't want to taint any of the investigation. We don't want Google using our algorithms and our searches. We don't want our social media stuff messing with what we're looking at. Generally, as a good rule, I like to think of it as a crime scene, and you wouldn't walk through the middle of a physical crime scene, so don't walk through the middle of a digital investigation. When you're finding a person, it's important to remember that you're not trying to own accounts. We're trying to find information about where someone is or who's behind a user account. These types of investigations are commonly referred to as passive recon or no touch. They're not invasive, meaning you don't attempt to interact with the target, their friends, or their family. We don't use any illegal hacking techniques, and we do not try to log into accounts. The reason that we do this is because if you're looking for a missing person or a malicious actor, it could be upsetting to the family, or it could bring that malicious actor, you to the attention of the malicious actor. Adversaries are obviously going to use illegal techniques because their goal is to gain access to systems and accounts. So it's important that we understand both, but it's also important that we don't use any illegal techniques when we're doing this. So 2 things I would strongly recommend to keep yourself safe while doing an investigation is using a VM and using a VPN. I don't recommend using your work VPN. You can roll your own VPN if you want. I use Proton, and I know a few researchers that use Brave and Nord and PIA. It is best practice to attempt to connect from the area that the target is in, but sometimes that's not possible because the connection in that area doesn't allow social media sites. In this case, you could use a proxy or you could connect from another location. It's highly unlikely that you're going to be tracked back, but it is a best practice not to mix your personal connection with an investigation. It is also a best practice to use a dedicated machine that you do not use for your personal or work use when you're doing this. This, I found, can create a barrier for many, including myself. When competing in a CTF, I've always just used a really well isolated VM because an extra machine is just out of reach for me. But when I do use OSINT for work, I do have a separate investigation machine that I use for that. Using a VM helps ensure that your personal social media information and browser information is not going to spill into your investigation. If you are going to be doing any work in the dark web or with Tor, it is strongly recommended that you use a separate machine from anything that you would be using for work or for personal use and not just a VM. It's very important to protect your personal identity by not using any personal social media accounts to search for people. As I said before, we don't know what their situation is, and we don't want any of that blowing back into our personal lives. A sock puppet account is a fake identity that you can use for recon. I strongly recommend creating sock puppets when investigating social media accounts instead of using your own. So how do you create a sock puppet safely? When you create a sock puppet, also commonly referred to as a SOC, you should be doing so from an isolated system like a VM, ideally behind a VPN. That can create some challenges because some social media sites like Facebook don't allow that. There are a couple ways around it. One is a burner cell for verification. A burner cell is a cell that you'll throw away and a number that does not register back to you. I've heard that Mint Mobile is a really great source for burner cells. You can also use a proxy service that tricks Facebook into thinking you have a residential IP. And in the past, I've actually used open public Wi-Fi to set up SOC accounts. Don't do this from your work and don't do this from your home unless you absolutely are stuck and it's just for a CTF. If you're doing this for an actual investigation, you want to make sure it doesn't track back to you. When you're making a SOC, unless you're doing a long-term investigation that involves a lot of recon, you don't need to put a lot of effort into your SOC. You'll need to generate a name and a picture for your profile. This person does not exist is a great site to snag a fake picture from, but you will want to edit it just a little bit because all of them have the same tell. And if someone's looking for a SOC, they'll notice it right away. You can also use a fake name generator or just something that doesn't tie back to you. Keeping your socks alive and organized can be a challenge. I keep my socks organized in an Excel spreadsheet, but I've heard a lot of people are using CRMs as well. You want to log into them from time to time to post on them and keep them alive. I use my burner phone to access my sock accounts, and you should never log into your accounts on your devices. They should always be kept separate. You also should not friend your socks. Your socks should not be friends with each other. You should not be friends with your socks. Your socks generally shouldn't be friends with people that you actually know. And if you log into your personal account on your burner cell, it's no longer your burner cell. You've now made that obsolete, so you need to change it again. When you create your sock, you want to follow some obvious accounts and groups. Political accounts, actors, sports professionals are really great choices, and they're usually suggested by the platforms as soon as you log in. And when you're creating the account, kind of think about the types of targets that you're going to be going after. So if I am going to be looking for missing children, then I'm going to use a sock that's going to have that kind of an age range. So maybe a 16 or a 17-year-old kid. If I'm looking for an adult, then maybe I would have, a 40 or a 50-year-old adult picture with an adult profile. And so the accounts that you follow should also kind of jive with that as well. Like if I'm a 19-year-old person, I might follow BTS, but maybe not so much if I'm a 60-year-old male. So one of the ways I use my OSINT skills is by competing in Trace Labs Capture the Flag events. There are certainly people out there who do this for a living and are much better at this than I am, but I found this to be something that brings me a lot of joy during COVID. It gives me a way to spend time with my friends in a safe and healthy way and know that the time that I'm putting aside to do this is actually really making an impact and really helping somebody. And I think that's one of the greatest things that I've done so far this year for my own self-care is to compete in the Trace Lab CTFs. It is a challenging topic, especially as myself, I'm a mother, to see people missing their children, but it is comforting to know that at least I tried to help. And Trace Labs puts together really, really great events, and their sense of community is incredibly helpful. They also have ongoing monthly investigations that you can assist with if you want to. So it's really easy to get started with OSINT. If you can Google, you can do this. All you need are the things to keep you safe, like a VM or a separate machine, a VPN, and the desire to literally search for virtual needles in a haystack. Some days it takes me hours to find just one little thing. While I've been researching people, companies, and other entities using OSINT for years, I only got into searching for people at the Layer 8 conference in Rhode Island, that's in the States in Providence, about 2 years ago. And since then, I've competed in several CTFs and consulted on cases related to domestic violence and revenge pornography. None of it's terribly complicated, and it's a really good skill to grow, and it translates really well into the day job if you want to start using OSINT as part of your security program. The most difficult part of this is staying organized, and if you use some of the tools and tips that I've outlined, it should help you stay organized throughout your investigations. I think I finished a little bit ahead of time, but if anybody has any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Siobhan. It's been absolutely fascinating talk. And even for me, I discovered a lot of very interesting things that I didn't know about before. So just a reminder to everyone to ask questions using the YouTube question chat facility. You can also ask questions using slide.do/OWASP website. So while we are getting questions there, I actually have a few questions myself, Siobhan, if you don't mind. So first question I have for you is the question on the image search. You mentioned the TNI rather than Google Images to search for an image. One interesting thing I know about OSINT, that sometimes people post OSINT challenges on Twitter where they show a picture of a place and basically saying, where is this? What kind of tool do you use to identify a location based on a picture?
So I am not awesome at identifying locations based on picture, but I look at it the same way that I look at finding a person. I kind of try and look at what's in the picture and then go from there. You can throw the picture through Google search and sometimes that'll come right back and give you where it is. You can also throw it through TinEye and see what happens, and sometimes it'll come right back. There are lots of resources for this, and it's a skill that I've actually in the past 2 months started working on. But what I do when I look at an image like that is look for things that might tip me off. Street signs, in unique cars, unique pictures, unique images that are in there that I can search on. So if I see, you know, a red fire hydrant with a silver top, I might start with that. If I know that it's in the United States and I know it's a red fire hydrant and I know it's a silver top, that's going to limit me down to, you know, some things.
Okay, thank you. The next question I have is about sock puppet accounts. So one of the things to have, because you described the whole ecosystem of having multiple sock puppet accounts, which are all friends with each other on social networks, but are never friends with yourself. But one of the questions I have is about verification, because I believe most social networks will require phone verification. Do you then recommend to actually have a burner phone, an individual number for every single sock puppet account?
So no, I use the same burner for all of my sock accounts. So there is that weakness. If you were doing this professionally, I'm sure someone would say, don't do that. But they're going to have more resources than I am. So I use the same burner for all of my socks, and I have, you know, a couple of Facebook, a couple of Twitter, a couple of LinkedIn, and a couple of other ones as well. But I don't have a tremendously large platform of them. But people who do this for a living, they have a much larger platform, and they do use individual phone numbers. You can use a Google number for some of them, but some of them it kicks it back to. So the Mint Mobile tends to be the easiest way.
Interesting. Yeah, because I remember some problem with Google Voice numbers. Occasionally, they don't take SMS messages from some networks. Okay, thank you. I have 2 more questions. Fascinating talk. So you mentioned after you finished using your VM, when you investigate using the VM, as opposed to using a physical machine, you recommend to burn the VM. But do you basically recommend to burn the VM but keep the notes? Is that right? So why do you keep the notes, right? Is it for further investigation by police or any other inquiries?
Yep. Yeah, it's really easy to burn a VM and restand it back up again. So just out of precaution, I do it. I do keep the notes all separate. When I'm taking notes for something, it's usually in Trello, or it's in Excel, or it's in my notebook. And you always want to make sure you keep your notes for your investigation. Now, if I'm doing a CTF, I may not hold the notes for very long because they're not really going to come back and ask you, like, where did you find this information? Because you've provided that. But if I'm handing it over for work and I'm doing an investigation where I'm handing it to the police, I always keep my notes for a couple of years, just in case I have to go to court and testify. I want to make sure that I've got the information and I can refresh my mind on it. And that's pretty much any investigation you would do. You want to keep your notes on.
Okay, I have one more question. I think we have questions coming in on YouTube as well. So when talking about this person does not exist.com, you mentioned about something about images that it creates and that some adjustments need to be made. Can you please elaborate what adjustments need to be made to that picture?
So I would maybe change the eyes or, you know, put them in a different background, because they all kind of have this dead stare. If you're investigating, again, if you're investigating a real quick investigation, something like a malicious email, or you're doing a CTF, you may not need to put that much effort into it. But if you don't want your SOC account to get shut down, those are things that I recommend, because they will shut them down if they look like SOCs, and those pictures tend to look like socks.
Okay, thanks. So I believe we have some questions coming in from YouTube. Andra, would you be able to read out the questions from YouTube, please?
Sure. Okay, so the first one is, what is the best way to keep private and protect our identities from tools like Maltego?
Using a VPN and running it from a VM would be, that, I mean, that's what I do. If you're using a VPN, for the most part, you're protecting your identity.
Perfect, thank you. And the second one is from Grayson, actually. Would you be able to elaborate more on what a CTF is like?
Yeah. So everybody's CTF experience is a little bit different. Mine, I usually balance through like taking care of my child. So it's usually really interesting. I have never had a negative experience in a CTF. When I do the TraceLabs CTFs, you log in and there's a list of accounts that you can go after, and they give you the missing person, and you take that information and you submit things like, you know, if you find their home address, if you find their mother, if you find their father, if you find phone numbers, if you find other social media accounts, usernames, passwords, locations. The goal is to find the person as fast as you can, as close to where they actually are. So if you have a post within the last week that shows that they're still alive, they want to see that stuff, and that's where you're going to get your biggest points. But don't pass up the little stuff either, because the you know, the mother's name, the phone numbers, and things like that, the little points all add up as well. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah. And something very technical, a question that just turned up. When you burn a VM, do you overwrite the VM files, or is it enough to revert to a prior snapshot?
I overwrite them. It's probably enough to refer to a snapshot, but I'm super paranoid.
Got it. Thank you. Sam?
Yes, thanks, Siobhan. So we actually have even more questions coming in. So I pasted some of them in chat for you as well, Siobhan. So one of the question is, what paid for apps and services can you not do without in your OSINT work? So any paid for apps that you use?
So I do pay for VMware, VM Fusion, as opposed to using VirtualBox. It's a matter of preference. I know a lot of people who use VirtualBox and they love it. For me, I like VM Fusion. It's just easier for me to work with, and I do pay for that. Oh well, and my burner, I do pay for the burner, okay. And that's pretty much it. Everything else I use is free.
Excellent. We have one more question. Are there any tools for finding deleted resources, such as deleted social media posts and other deleted things?
That's a very good question. And I cut it because I thought I was going to be over time. Yes, you can use the Internet Archive, which is literally one of my favorite projects. They scan and save websites from years and years and years ago. So if you have like a favorite message board that you're really missing, you can go and look at it. Or if you're looking for an account that's been deleted, you can go and look at that account. Also, Google Cache is really helpful. I used that just recently. I was looking for someone, and they had deleted their Twitter account from the time that I was alerted to the problem to the time that I went to investigate it. It was gone. But thankfully, Google Cache had a full backup of everything that was on their account. Every post that had been made, every picture that had been posted, it was still all right there, and it was super easy. And the way you do that is you Google something, it'll come back with a result, and then there's a little drop down to the right-hand side, and you hit that and say cache, and it'll give you the cached version of the site, which is super helpful.
Wonderful. We actually have the next question, which is exactly on the opposite. It's basically, are there any effective strategies for people to remove any mentions or records from search engines? And how do you find this kind of tools to remove yourself?
So that's complicated. There are lots of companies that you can pay that will go through and find all of your presence on the internet, and you can have them remove your presence on the internet. It depends on where you are too and what the laws are surrounding it. I know if some of the data with the EU and GDPR, but generally speaking, my experience has been that I have to physically write them a letter and ask them to remove my information. And even then, sometimes it still is still there. The biggest thing you'll have success with is images. because there's a lot of laws around images. If you ask someone to take your image off of something, they have to in most cases. But once it's out there, it's pretty much out there.
Yeah, it's not easy to disappear from the internet. We have another question about trace labs. How often are trainings to prepare for trace lab CTFs? And is there a link? How do you prepare for a CTF?
Oh, so there are trainings that are provided by multiple different people for competing in the CTFs. Oh, somebody just did one that was really good. Alfie Dennis does a real, and I probably butchered her name, does a really wonderful training specifically around competing in the Trace Lab CTFs. And I believe that those are still running. Trace Labs offers some training as well. They usually run them at the same time that they're doing the CTFs, which there tends to be one about every month or so. But I would say if you're comfortable with Google and you can use an Excel spreadsheet, jump in there, try it. You're not losing anything. It's like $10 to do a CTF.
Wonderful. There's also a question about the tool. There's a question how to protect yourself from tools like Full Story.
So I'm actually not familiar with the tool.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the tool myself as well.
No.
We have one more question, which is basically how do you use Facebook for research or for CTF?
So there's two ways to do it. Some posts are available publicly and you can use a Google Doc to find what you're looking for and you'll get it that way. Other posts are going to be private. So you've got to create an account and actually log in and look at it. I do not friend any of the people to be able to see what's on the account. If they have their account set to private, I just back away and go somewhere else. Because most of the time I'm competing in a CTF and I'm looking for a child and I do not want to upset that family. I have in the past, when I was looking for a malicious actor, tried to find an account to see if I could get more information off of the account, but it's also risky doing that. So my advice, unless you're comfortable in this, would be to just use what you can using your SOC accounts and view what you can using your SOC accounts, but don't try and friend anybody or reach out to them or contact them.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Siobhan. I think it's been a fascinating talk. I just would like to tell everyone that the slides will be available afterwards and you'll be able to download them. But now it's time for us to move on to the next presentation. And our next speaker is going to be Grayson. Let's see if I can share my screen. So Grayson is a security engineer at R2C, so he plays a lot with semantic grep. Previously, he worked for various organizations, including the government. And yeah, tonight he's gonna tell us all about how to detect complex code patterns using semantic grep. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Grayson, and you should be able to take it away. I will make you a co-host in a second, so you can share your screen.
Great, thanks, Sam.
Okay, Grayson, you have permission to share your screen now.
Okay, let's see.
Excellent, we can see your screen.
Great, thank you for the confirmation. Okay, well, thank you everyone for having me here. My name is Grayson, as was introduced. I'm a security engineer at R2C, and today I'm going to be talking about detecting complex code patterns using semantic grep. So a little bit about myself. This is me and my wife over here. My name is Grayson. As Sam mentioned, in a previous life before I worked at R2C, I worked for the US Department of Defense, doing all manner of things. But now I work for R2C, which is a San Francisco static analysis startup on a mission to profoundly improve software security and reliability. And down here is our modern COVID times team photo. And so I want to take a second and just give a shout out to everybody on the photo and even some who are not. R2C is a great place. It's a great team to work for and work with. And everything that you see here would not be possible without the contributions of every single team member. It's great. They're all extremely motivated, highly intelligent, and is a great place to work. So special shout outs to all of them, and a special thanks from me because it's an honor to work with them all. So the too long didn't watch of this talk is that writing secure code is hard. Static analysis tools are too noisy or too slow. grep isn't expressive enough for finding what you want in source code. And so what we need is something that's fast, code aware, flexible, powerful, and open source. Enter semgrep or semantic grep. Semgrep is a fast and syntax-aware semantic code pattern search for many languages, which is a huge mouthful to say. And so an easier way to think of it is that it's like grep, but specifically for code. You can use semgrep to search code. You can use it to find security bugs, vulnerabilities. You can use it to guard your code, enforce specific best practices or patterns. And you can also use it to migrate up from old, deprecated, or insecure APIs. And I'll demonstrate a little bit of each of these as we go through the talk. So as an example, really fast, of using semgrep to search code, we at R2C have used it to great effect to find vulnerabilities in open source projects. And so these are just a couple of CVEs that we've had issued as a result of semgrep rules. So CVE is on the left. The specific semgrep rule is listed here, and a description of the vulnerability is here. So pretty neat stuff. It enables a lot of really cool things. So from here, the rest of the talk is going to be laid out like this. We're going to go over a little bit of a background of semgrep. We're going to talk about grep versus abstract syntax trees and tools which use both. And then we're going to dive in and do a lot of semgrep examples. So we're going to learn it live. We're going to do a lot of demos live. And so I hope that the demo gods smile favorably upon me today. And then we'll spend just a little bit of time at the end talking about integrating semgrep into CI/CD pipelines, because code patterns are great, but if their real power comes when you automate the whole process. And then we'll talk about a community rule registry that R2C maintains. So as mentioned, semgrep is open source. You can go right over to the GitHub page and check it out. You can browse the source code. You can literally check it out, or you can investigate it. Yeah, you can grab an issue if you want to contribute, anything like that. The extremely high-level architecture is that the core of semgrep is written in OCaml, and then there is a Python wrapper around the OCaml core that adds a lot of niceties to the experience. Semgrep has a long history of being open source. It was initially developed at Facebook by this gentleman here on the left, Siobhan, and was used there to enforce a lot of security rules. So Siobhan joined R2C in July of last year. He has a PhD from INRIA and was a contributor to Coccinelle, which was the predecessor to semgrep, but specifically for the C language. Speaking of languages, semgrep has mainline support for Go, Java, JavaScript, and Python. And then we have limited support for several other languages, to include Ruby, TypeScript, OCaml, PHP, and C. And we're always adding more. In the works right now are Kotlin and C#. So that was a little bit of a background about semgrep, where it came from and what it's for. And now I want to take a second and talk about grep and abstract syntax trees, or ASTs. So if you've ever used grep to try to find patterns in code before, you may be familiar with this experience. So these are some, let's say you're trying to find exec, like instances of exec in your code base. These are many different ways in which that pattern could show up in your code over here on the left. And so starting out, the first two are pretty easy to express as a regular expression or in grep. All you have to do is check for exec and a parenthesis, open parenthesis. The second two are a little bit more complicated, because now you have to begin handling white space or new lines. And then the last three are incredibly complicated, because the other exec function might be one that you don't even want to find in the first place. You might start detecting comments, or you might start detecting string literals. And so if you wanted to express this in regular expressions, you can imagine just how complicated this would get over time. So this is the classic XKCD of trying to use regular expressions to solve one of your problems, and then regular expressions becomes one of your problems. And this is exactly what we experience when we try to find code using regexes with any degree of precision. So the reason for this is because fundamentally code really isn't a string, it's a tree. And so if you remember back to like compilers or programming languages, if you've ever taken one of those classes, during the process of converting programming language into machine code, it goes through a process where it eventually gets transformed into what's called an abstract syntax tree, or an AST. And those tend to look like this toy example here on the right. And so if you wanted to use the abstract syntax tree to be much more precise in matching specific code patterns, there exist a number of ways to do that in pretty much every language. And there also exist a handful of open source tools that use the abstract syntax tree of the language for security checking. Some examples of that include Bandit or dlint in Python, ESLint for JavaScript, and GoSec for Go. The issue with these is that if you want to add a specific custom rule or a custom check that you want that doesn't already exist, then you now have to become an expert in the AST syntax for every language that you want a rule for. So every abstract syntax tree works a little bit differently. You interact with it a little bit differently, like different libraries. All of the nodes have different types. You have to begin to understand all of that if you want to begin to write custom checks. And so if you don't want to do that yourself, you can, of course, pay for it. But commercial tools tend to be a little bit cumbersome. They don't play well with like modern development pipelines. They can be slow. I've heard that certain commercial static analysis tools can take on the order of days or weeks to finish one run. And of course, they can be expensive depending on which one and which licensing model. And so this image really drives it home. This is something that taken from a blog post that came out of Instagram last year, where on the left you have regular expressions, which are really easy to do. They're easy to write, but they're fraught with problems because they lack precision. And then on the right, you have really powerful program analysis, but it can be slow, complex, or cost money. And so SemGrep lives somewhere in the middle, where it tries to maintain this balance between being easy to use, but it still operates on the AST. And so you benefit from the precision of AST-based searching. And so as you'll see in a little bit, SemGrep patterns look like the code you're writing. So you don't have to go learn something new. You don't have to learn a new way of thinking. You just have to write something that looks very similar to the code that you're trying to find. And so this is the key insight that SemGrep provides, which is that it lets you reason about your analysis the way you reason about your code. And so without further ado, we will jump into some examples and see how these go. Please let me know if the examples don't show up. I'm going to be navigating to different screens. Yeah, just let me know if something seems broken. All right, so let's say you're a security engineer at a company, and it has come down from on high that we are banning exec in all of our code. So we just want to find all instances of exec and get rid of it out of our code. So that will be the place that we start with. And what I'm going to do is go over to this page, which is a live editor where you can test out SemGrep patterns on code. And so this is heavily inspired by regex 101. If you've ever been to that website where you can see, you can like type in your regex and type in some text and see what matches and what doesn't. So heavily inspired by that. And so similarly, your SemGrep pattern will be in this top pane here, and the code that you're trying to match will be in this bottom pane here, and then your matches will show up over here on the right. And so to refresh your memory, the example is that we're looking for instances of exec. And as I mentioned before, semgrep patterns look very similar to the code that you're trying to find. And so the easiest way to get started is to literally copy and paste some code from the code you're trying to find into the pattern pane. And if we click run, we will see that it will detect the exact thing that we specified, which is perhaps obvious. But what we really want to do is we want to find all instances of exec, not just exec ls or something similar. And so this is the first sort of fundamental operator of semgrep, and it's called the ellipsis operator. The ellipsis operator works a little bit like dot star and regex, but what it's doing is it's abstracting away sequences of things. So it's saying, find me 0 or more of the kind of thing that would go here in the programming language. And maybe that's a little bit complicated, but it'll make sense after I demonstrate it. And so what we're going to do is eliminate the argument from exec. We're going to put in the ellipsis operator here, which is just 3 dots. And we're going to click run, which is going to match every instance of exec down here in the code pane. And so as you can see, it now matches every instance of exec. And you can see that it has some advantages over regular expressions, such as you don't have to worry about white space. You don't have to worry about new lines. You don't have to worry about trying to determine whether or not it's the right function. It doesn't match the comments, and it doesn't match the string literals. And the reason for that is because semgrep is aware of the abstract syntax tree. It's aware of the fact that this is code, and it's matching on the code rather than just on the strings. And so as a result, we don't have to worry about the new lines. We don't have to worry about any of that because it gets rid of all that and parses exclusively as the AST. The next example is, let's say you want to search for hard-coded strings in your AWS client. And so if you're a Python programmer and have interacted with AWS at all, this might be familiar to you, where you have to pass in like a secret access key and an access key ID to your AWS client. And so we'll go over here to the editor again. We will copy the code that we're interested in finding. And if you recall, the ellipsis operator abstracts away sequences of things, which means we can also use it in here to say a sequence of characters. And so what we're looking for here is any instance of Boto3 client where there is a hard-coded string used in either one of these parameters. And if we click search, we will find that we pick it up exactly as we expect. But interestingly, what we also pick up is this one. And so these initially look like variables, which we maybe don't want to match. But semgrep is smart enough to recognize that the only other use of this has been as a static string. And so it will also pick this up because it recognizes that what you're trying to do is match an instance where this is a hard-coded string. So that was a little bit about the ellipsis operator and how to use it and how to think about using it. Up next, the next examples are going to focus on another property of semgrep, which are called metavariables, and I'll explain as I go. So metavariables operate a little bit like capture groups in regex, and so they like grab a thing and hold on to that thing throughout the operation. And so the example here that I want to bring up is the metavariable syntax is in semgrep is that you must start it with a $, and then you must use all capital letters after that. And what the metavariable is doing is it's saying, find me some unit of code that belongs here, but I'm not quite sure what it is yet. And so as you can see, the pattern that we specified is the metavariable x with the metavariable y and the equality operator between them. And so we will find, or we will now match all of these things. So 5 equals 5, 7 equals 8, cat equals cat, some expression equals some expression, And then even something like this, which is another expression, but it's inside like a Python list comprehension. And so as before, the meta variable says like, there's something here, but I don't know what it is yet. And so SemGrep will do its best to like try to figure that out. Something that is really cool about SemGrep 2 is that it enforces meta variables to be equivalent. So in the same way that if you're coding something and you reuse the variable x, you would expect it to contain the same data. So SemGrep will operate similarly, where if you say, find me all cases of x is equal to x, it will only match situations where the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the equality operator are the same, like this one. So you can see here that it doesn't matter what it is. If they are the same, they will be matched. And so this is a really powerful feature that SemGrep provides. Because meta variables can be equivalent, what that means is that we can do things like approximate data flow. And so this example here is a path traversal vulnerability in the Python Flask framework. And so what can happen is with this code, an attacker can specify a file name that includes ... and can traverse back up into the file system because there's no sanitization here. And we can use SemGrep to detect this case where the input, like the attacker-controlled input, ends up being sent as a file, which results in a path traversal. So as before, we'll start by copying the code over. But the couple of things that we're going to do is we're going to walk through each of these and say, like, which things do we want to abstract away? So first, we don't really care what the route is. So the route would be like the path in a, on a website or something like that. We don't really care what it is, so we're going to abstract it away with the ellipsis operator. We do care what this file name is, but we don't know what the name is. And so like it could be a variable that's named anything. And so we're going to use a meta variable to replace there. We don't care about this print statement, and so we're going to abstract it away by saying ellipsis, because there could be some amount of code between here and there that, but we don't particularly care about it. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to reuse this in order to enforce that these are equivalent. And then we don't care about the rest of these arguments as well. So maybe we want as attachment to be true, but there could be other arguments in the function. And so we're going to use ellipsis to say the first thing must match this thing. The first argument must match this, but the rest of it we don't care about. And if we click run, we will see that it picks this up. And so to illustrate my point about meta variables being the same, I will change this to some other file name, and it will no longer pick this up. And so the importance of this example is that it illustrates how to find a security vulnerability using approximate data flow. And so, the file name is like an attacker-controlled thing. It gets into a source of a function or method that could expose a vulnerability. And this allows us to search for vulnerabilities in code using SemGrep with much, much more precision than regular expressions would ever provide. So that's a little bit about meta variables. What I want to talk about next is composing patterns. And so you can certainly use SemGrep to match single patterns, but it becomes even more powerful when you begin to incorporate Boolean logic with several patterns. So let's say you wanted to find, So this is a Go example. This is Go code where it's setting up a TLS configuration, so trying to encrypt communications between a client and server. But the highlighted things here are things that we want to find. So we want to find insecure TLS configurations where the SSL version is too low So SSL 3.0 is known to be very vulnerable, easy to break. And then another insecure flag in this TLS configuration is insecure skip verify being set to true, which forces a client not to validate the server identity. So it's kind of similar to when you like SSH into something and it says like, hey, here's the fingerprint for the server. Do you want to trust it? It skips that whole process, which can be vulnerable because you might end up talking to a server that you don't want to. And so what we want to find in this example are TLS configurations that have either one of these conditions, which sounds a lot like a Boolean or, right? Like we want to find a config with this or that, or both. And we can do that using some grep. So switch. And so in the editor, you can add in new pattern clauses with these plus buttons, and you can subtract them with the X button. And the dropdown will give you a series of sort of Boolean operators to work with. And so as I mentioned before, what we're trying to do is find situations where a TLS configuration has this situation or that situation. And so if we use or, we can find TLS configs that have either the too low of a SSL version or insecure skip verify set to true. And if we run this, we'll see. We'll see which ones it finds. So the first example that it finds is one where the TLS version is too low and where insecure skip verify is set to true, which is what we want. This TLS version is okay, but insecure skip verify is still there, so it still flags. And if we removed this one, then this one will no longer be picked up, but this one will. And so this illustrates how to compose patterns together, such that you can begin finding more and more complicated things. So now, those are sort of an overview of the fundamentals of SymGrep. I'm going to talk a little bit about some advanced features. And so for the sake of time, I'm probably going to skip this first example, which deals with filtering. So I'll just explain that in addition to ORs, you can also do nots with the Boolean logic. And so you can say, like, I want to find this pattern, but I want you to filter out these patterns that match this criteria. And so SymGrep has that ability as well. If you want to get fancy, you can use inline string regexes. So let's say you wanted to find, let's say you're working with an API where if you use the HTTP scheme like directly in the URL, it will connect over HTTP instead of HTTPS. You can use SymGrep to specify a regular expression for that constant string that will only flag if that constant string is met. And so if we go to the editor, I'll show you an example of what this looks like. The pattern here is like a new HTTP request, and we're looking for situations where only HTTP but not S are specified, and then some host and path that we don't care about. And we can see that we match this one but not this one, which is exactly what we want, which is pretty neat. SymGrep has some support for auto-fixing things, which is really neat. And so if we return to this like SSL insecure version check from before, what I am going to show here is how to just automatically fix this in your code. So up until now, we've been operating under this simple tab. If you search or if you switch over to the advanced tab, it will show you kind of what's going on under the hood. So what SymGrep ingests under the hood is a YAML file with a bunch of like keys inside of it to include the patterns that you want to search for here. But one of the keys that it provides is this fix regex, which will do a regular expression replacement, but limited exclusively to the code pattern that you matched. And so what we want to do is we want to replace this old version of SSL 3.0 with the highest version of TLS 1.3. And so you can specify this fix regex key, what you want to replace, what you want to replace it with. And then the editor will give you a preview pane over here, which is a little squished right now because I'm zoomed in to make it easier to see. But you can see here that the version has been upgraded. And then if we click apply fix, it will apply the fix inline automatically. And now this TLS configuration has been updated to be secure, which is awesome. SemGrep has, with the ability to capture meta variables, you can start to get really creative with how you use that. And so one of the guys on our team had this idea a while back to use meta variables to output a comma-separated value of things. And so this particular example is looking at a Java application that's using Spring, and it's enumerating all of the API routes in that application by searching for specific code patterns and then outputting those things as a comma-separated value, which you can see over here. And so it will tell you the method name, the HTTP verb, and if there's a path, it will tell you the path. And then it will also tell you the permission level of that route. And so this is really cool because it allows you to not just search for specific patterns in your code, but allows you to ask questions of your code, such as how many API routes do I have? What is their authorization or authentication requirements? What is the path that it requires to get there? And so using SemGrep to extract a lot of this information, you can then build something like this, which is a visualization of a Python application backend that we're working on for a little bit of time. And as you can see, what it's doing is it's enumerating all of the functions, but also annotating them with authorization requirements. And so yellow is these require some user permissions, green are admin only routes, and red are totally unauthenticated routes. And so we've used this as we've gone in on security assessments of code, where we'll just run this SemGrep extractor, route extractor, produce this visualization, and then it gives us an idea right away of oh, here are the unauthenticated routes. Let's go start looking at those, or let's start pen testing those, rather than taking the time to have to figure all that out manually. The last feature I want to demonstrate is that we just added something that we're calling the generic pattern matching support, or the generic language, which we added in order to support things like configuration files. So this is a Terraform example, looking for the classic publicly exposed S3 bucket. And if we go to the editor, we'll be able to see it. Well, we might be able to see it if it works. There we go. We'll be able to see it work. And so the way to use this is by specifying generic, which doesn't use a normal SemGrep language parser. It doesn't use Python, doesn't use anything like that. It uses a special algorithm that one of our program analysis people developed. And then it allows you to write any pattern generically and to detect these things. And so once again, this is a Terraform example. We just finished doing this for a bunch of our Docker files. So we now have a bunch of Docker file linting that we're doing, which is really neat. So that was a bit of a whirlwind, but that's kind of SemGrep, how to use in a nutshell. What I want to talk about now is automating it, because searching code manually for these things is cool, but guarding your code in a continuous manner is even cooler. So SemGrep has a couple of integrations natively. The best supported is GitHub Actions. We also have some support for GitLab and other CI/CD providers. You can also run it as a pre-commit hook. But if your CI/CD provider of choice is not listed, it is easy to add to your pipeline because it's distributed either as a Docker file or a Docker container or as a Linux binary. And we have support for various easily consumable outputs to include JSON, which makes it really easy to just put the data elsewhere. So because it's easy to install and it's easy to get the data out, it's easy to integrate into a CI/CD pipeline. And so this is an example of semgrep running on our code in a GitHub action. And this is kind of what it looks like. And I'm going to zoom in on the issue here, which if you read it has this really long name, but it says Python Flask security injection path traversal. And then it shows you a line. And so this is actually really neat because this is like a real finding that we really had on our real code, where this path traversal was detected by semgrep using a rule very similar to the one that I showed earlier. And semgrep picked it up. We had this rule in our CI/CD pipeline, and then it just blocked that commit from being made. And so what this means as a security engineer is that this code never went to production. And I can only imagine, like, if it had, how long would it have been there before somebody had detected it? Would it have required a pen test? Would somebody have discovered it? Worst case scenario, a malicious actor could have gotten to it. But because we were running this in a continuous manner on our code, this code never went public and I never have to worry about it, which is like amazing. Cool. So, so I talk a lot about writing semgrep rules, but maybe you're sitting there thinking like, I ain't got time for that. And if you want to get started with semgrep quickly, we also maintain a community registry with, I believe we just crested 1,000 rules. So we have more than 1,000 rules that are available for your use. So we have written a lot of them, but we also have a lot of like really stellar community contributors. So the author and maintainer of Node.js Scan, which is a Node.js security scanner, has contributed a bunch of JavaScript rules. A gentleman by the name of Damian Grisky, who wrote a book called Go Perf Book, has a lot of rules that he's contributed. We have contributions from OWASP members, and perhaps you, if you're interested in contributing or you have a rule that you think the public would benefit from, like you can contribute it very easily. In order to make consumption very easy, they're arranged into sets, and these are some examples of some of those sets over here. So if you want to download rules and run them that are targeted for cross-site scripting or JWT, best practices, whatever you like, you might be able to find them there. And we're constantly adding more, constantly grouping and adding new rules. So be on the lookout for those as well. Using it is really easy. All you have to do is install semgrep and then point semgrep at a configuration URL for those rules, and it will just run happily. So if you wanted to run, for example, this GoSec set of rules, all you have to do is say semgrep -- config and then the URL to the set of rules, and it will run them. So how might you roll this out on your projects if you're interested in doing so? We have 3 primary integration points. You can prototype our VS Code extension if you so choose to. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, support for Git pre-commit, and we also have integrations into various CI/CD pipelines. So integrating them into some or all of these is beneficial because it helps run these rules in an automated fashion. We also have a way of managing semgrep through a user interface that we call semgrep community. And so if you're using semgrep community, you also gain the additional power to either set rules as blocking or only notifying. And so if you're an AppSec engineer or a security engineer and you're working on a new rule and you're like, I'm not sure this is going to be the best rule ever, you can set it to notify first, which will not block builds, but it'll allow you to monitor its performance to make sure that you don't like overwhelm people or something like that. To get started quickly, you can use existing rules or rule sets. You can group your own rules together if you want to browse through the registry of 1,000 rules and pick the ones you like, or you can write your own. And it's very easy to do. You can use the editor that we were using earlier, and then you can click this add policy button, and it will allow you to deploy a new rule on your code very easily. So all of this like kind of boiled down into a nutshell. The continuous integration and the community rules allow you to do this, which I think is really important, and that's to set your security policy in stone with automated scanning. So we at R2C, for instance, use certain tech stacks, and in October and November, we made it our goal to eliminate cross-site scripting from our apps. And the way that we did that is by codifying like, hey, these are all the ways that we can think of that cross-site scripting might happen in our tech stack. And so we're gonna write some grep rules for all of these. We're gonna provide you with like the secure alternative, the secure recommendation, and we're gonna run these things constantly on our code. And so as a result, we've blocked like two instances that may have exposed our applications to cross-site scripting. And that's just in the past couple of months, which is really cool. So I have like a little bit of a case study, and I'm not sure when my timer started, but it looks like I might be pretty close to time. So I think I'm going to skip through this. We have a blog. If you want to read this case study, you can check it out at the blog.
You're okay for time, Grayson, by the way, so feel free to elaborate. Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, I'll go back and do that then. A case study of like how SemGrep would look in an organization with like developers like constantly writing code and security engineers constantly trying to like keep that code secure. This is an example of that and how and a situation that we had at R2C. So the blog is here if you want like the nitty-gritty details, but I'm going to surf over them at a high level really fast. And so if you haven't been able to tell, some of our backends is Python, just because a lot of the examples have been Python. And so the database engine that we use is SQL Alchemy, which is a Python, what do they call it? ORM. And so what happened here is that one of our ORMs was managing tokens and secrets. And as we were logging things, those tokens were actually getting logged, which is a super easy mistake to make. I feel like almost everyone has done this at some point, and if you haven't, you probably will at some point in your career. And so, but we didn't want to do that because we didn't want those tokens to be leaked in any way, shape, or form. And so one of our engineers came up with this idea, which was to write a SQL Alchemy extension called obfuscated string that you can use such that if you try to log it or if you use its string representation in any form, it will blot out the actual string with stars or asterisks. And then the way that you use it is in your database model, you specify the database field here, and then you use this obfuscated string instead of the regular string, which means that when it gets logged or the string representation of it is used at any point in time, it blots it out like this. And so this is like great, and it's a great, great way of automating this, a solution to this problem, rather than telling people like, hey, don't log tokens. It's now it's don't log tokens, use this safe alternative, which is much easier to employ on a regular basis. But the issue is that how do you know which fields to use the obfuscated string for? So if you have a new developer on your team, they may make the mistake where they just don't use the obfuscated string. Instead, they use the regular string. And so this is where SemGrep comes into play, because you can write a rule that says on some field, database field, find a pattern where DB string is used. And then you can use this advanced syntax that says the metavariable column must match this regular expression. And what this regular expression is saying is any field that has the name token, key, email, or secret, and I think we recently added password, SemGrep will pop up and say, hey, this looks like it might be sensitive information. Do you want to use obfuscated string instead of regular string? And so what we've done now is we've like chiseled in, set in stone some of our previous knowledge, our security knowledge, and made it so that propagating that knowledge forward happens in a completely automated fashion. And so it's not dependent on somebody remembering to tell the new developer, hey, you need to do this. It just happens because it's all built in automatically. And if I pop over to the editor, we can see how this works. So you can see like this one is okay. This one has token in it, but it's using string, and so it gets alerted. That one has secret in it and it's using string, so it also gets alerted. Yeah, so I'm pretty much at the end here. A couple of things that are coming up soon. As I mentioned before, we're always improving our language support and adding new languages. We have Kotlin and C# coming soon. We're always adding more rules, and we just recently started publishing cheat sheets to go along with various things that we've learned over time. SimGrep community is always going improvements. SimGrep community is a way that you can manage your SimGrep installations sort of at scale using a user interface. We have the VS Code extension in beta. If you want to test it out, please poke holes, make issues, file issues, that kind of a thing. And then we're improving our generic pattern support as well, the one that I showed you earlier that matched configuration files, to get better and better over time. If you want to get started, it's very easy to install. You can install it via brew or pip, or if you want to use the live editor, don't want to install anything, you can try it out there. And that's the end. So if you feel so inclined, please take this survey here at the bottom, r2c.dev/survey, where we will take that feedback, and we use this feedback to inform some of our decisions about what we implement next. To include, this is how we decided on Kotlin and C# support. So if you have a language that you want, take the survey. You can check out the website, r2c.dev. You can join the community Slack. It's very active, lots of people in there helping each other out all the time. So yeah, that's my talk. Are there any questions?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Grayson. Absolutely fascinating talk. And just to remind everyone, you can ask questions using YouTube chat feature if you're logged into YouTube. Otherwise, if you want to ask your question anonymously, you can ask your question using slide.do/OWASP website. So while we're getting these questions, I've actually got a few questions that I picked up while you were speaking, Grayson. So you showed us some sets. So you organize rules into sets, which is great. But I've only seen sets around vulnerability, that cross-site scripting. Do you have sets which are, for example, an OWASP top 10 set for Python? Just a full set, just say OWASP top 10 Python, that kind of stuff. I just think it would be useful in because you only show cross-site scripting. Do you have the full OWASP top 10?
Yeah, so we have rules for all of the OWASP top 10, and but we haven't arranged them into packs yet. And so our approach up till now has been focusing on specific vulnerability classes. And so as an example, our next the next pack that we want to publish is for code injection, which on the OWASP top 10 falls under the injection category, but there's a lot of like injections. So if we just covered like all injection, it would be very difficult to manage. So we've broken it down into smaller pieces, and we're publishing those as we make them. However, what I want to demonstrate is if I just click into a random rule, hopefully it has it. The registry is entirely backed by GitHub. So like if you want to make contributions, all you have to do is make a pull request. But one of the things, looks like this one doesn't have it. We have some metadata for almost all of our rules, and almost all of them are labeled by OWASP top 10 if they're a security rule. So as an example, I'm pulling one up now that has this OWASP key, which falls under the A1 injection. And then usually if they're a security rule, they will also have a CWE annotated with it. And so if you wanted to, you can run a bunch of rules and then group them by OWASP or CWE, or you can search through either the registry on the website, or you can search through the GitHub in order to find rules that match the specific OWASP top 10 vulnerability.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome, because I noticed that the sets get flagged, like for example, best practices, right? So, but yeah, if somebody wanted to create a set which is basically OWASP top 10 for Python or for Go, they can actually easily do it using that metadata.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I have another question, and that question is around the severity, right? So you showed a couple of examples where severity is warning. Is that an arbitrary severity? For example, in an enterprise, probably you would want to use something like high, medium, low, critical, this kind of, is it a label or is it an actual severity? And how does it manifest itself when the rule is actually hit?
Yeah, so the 3 levels of support for severity in SemGrep right now are info, warning, and error. And the severity field has been a subject of much debate in the community itself. So many people have requested exactly what you've specified, so sort of the 5 categories. But right now, the severity key is specified entirely by the rule author. And so obviously what that kind of does is, because it's a community registry, so the different rule authors have different ideas about what severity means. And so for me personally, I only use error if it's actually going to like crash the program or like nearly 100% introduce a vulnerability. Otherwise, it will be a warning if I'm like not quite so sure. And so some people have brought up, as I've said this to me, that like that's really more of like a confidence measurement than a severity measurement, which is true, but we're constantly iterating on things and trying to improve the product, and that feedback is always useful. So if you have any specific requests, the best way to do it is to either ask in the community Slack or to go to the GitHub page and make an issue. And we follow both of those things really closely, and are always looking for the community improvements or community contributions to make improvements based on the feedback.
Okay, excellent. I've got a few more questions. Actually, more questions are coming on YouTube, which is great. So the question that I have next is about GitHub Action, right? You mentioned some CI/CD integration. So GitHub Action is currently available, right? But when it actually finds an issue, finds a problem, does it actually raise a Jira issue, a GitHub issue? Is it like a proper, can be used like a DevSecOps pipeline? So when a SemGrep discovers a hit on a rule, will it create a ticket?
It will not create a ticket yet. However, we are finishing up work on inline pull request comments. And so if you have a pull request on which it scans, SemGrep will comment the rule message on the line that it had a finding. And so that's another example of things that we're building. Someday soon, as we work on these things.
Okay, wonderful. And there's also a question on the various CI/CD system support. So you, of course, mentioned GitHub Actions. What about others? Is there support for Azure DevOps, Jenkins, TeamCD, and anything other than GitHub Actions?
So we have the best support is for GitHub Actions and for GitLab. Those are the ones that we have people using the most, and they come to us and ask for stuff the most. And so that just ends up being the stuff that gets worked on. We are also working on Jenkins integration. We are not working on Azure pipelines or the other one that was mentioned. I don't remember what it was. However, I hope that because the distribution of it is easy, you can either use it as a Docker container or just as like a regular old binary. And because the outputs are easy to work with, that it's easy to integrate with other systems. Now, I do not know for sure because I don't really know the the guts of those systems. But that was the design choice that was made on our end to try to make it as easy as possible to integrate with other things. So if it's not listed, hopefully it's easy to make it work in those environments.
Okay. Or as you mentioned, probably because the product is fully open source, is make a pull request and start working on it, right?
Exactly. So we had a community member who wanted JUnit XML support for one of his pipelines, and he just added it as an output format, and now it's in the product. So
wonderful, thank you. I think we've got quite a few questions coming in from YouTube viewers. Andrea, can you please voice those questions, please?
Sure. Thank you, Grayson. That was really interesting. The first question is connected to CI/CD pipelines, and it's about the time impact. So is there a large impact in time when integrating these checks with a CI/CD pipeline?
I assume that means like runtime. So from
yeah.
from commit time or PR time to finish. So obviously like there's some time involved. It's not like days. We are pretty sensitive to that because we use it ourselves. And so when things start to take a long time, usually somebody will complain, and then somebody will go make it faster. So the I don't know. I mean, everybody's experience is different. My personal experience with it is that it takes like under 5 minutes usually to complete. And we run something like 250 rules on our repository. So one thing worth mentioning is that like the more rules you add, like the longer it's going to take. But yeah, we run something like 250, and it takes under 5 minutes for us. The issue that we have that we struggle the most with is with minified JavaScript files. So minified JavaScript really messes up the parser. And so to solve this, what we did was we added a timeout flag. So if you decide, I don't want to wait, 30 minutes to process this minified JavaScript file, you can specify a timeout. And the timeout means like, this is the max time that any one rule will run on a file, or it's the max time that any one file will be processed. That's what the timeout flag means.
Awesome, thank you. And the second question from YouTube is, if you have a few minutes, can you walk us around the registry? For instance, how would I find and then apply a set of rules to find security vulnerabilities in Ruby?
Sure. So I'll do my best. There's the user interface is pretty much constantly in flight. Like we're always testing and adding new things, and sometimes removing them. But I will show what's there at least. So on the website, the registry is at /explore, or this explore tab. And there's 3 tabs up here: explore, rule sets, and rules. Explore is kind of like our just highlighted ones. And so you can see those here. They're loosely grouped into categories, as you can see here. If we go over to rule sets, we have a lot of right now we just publicize every rule set that's made, including community rule sets. So you can see that they're prefixed with usernames, GitHub usernames, for instance. And there's a lot of them in here. And so this is probably the page that's had the least amount of love given to it. And so the way you have to search through it is both with good old Control F and search through it. So if you want to search for something such as Ruby, you can see who has put together a Ruby pack. And if you click into it, it will show you the specific rules that are in the pack, which is helpful. And then the last tab is all the rules. And so for all the rules, what we can do is search by language, by certain categories. The categories are arbitrary, so they may or may not be helpful. And then by severity. And as I mentioned before, we have info, warning, and error. And then if you can try this, which uses a fuzzy search as well. And so if you're looking for Ruby, if you type in Ruby, it will probably show you all the Ruby rules that we have. And then to group them, currently the way that you have to do that is that you have to use the user interface. And you'll do this by clicking this Add to Policy button. And so you would have to go in and create what's something called a policy, apply that policy to your repository, and then you can add rules to your policy that will be on your repositories.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Sam?
Yes, if there are no further questions, I think this is it. Thank you very much, Grayson.
Thank you.
I think it's absolutely fascinating new product. Thank you very much for making it open source and free and available to everyone. And I think this is like a next step in SAST, in static application security testing, because development teams can now utilize this for free and run on the code, especially with hooks and CI/CD integration. And I think there's another community involved in writing rules. I think it's absolutely fantastic and great. And of course, the time, of course, right? So one of the advantages, as you said, that of course it's much faster compared with some of the existing commercial packages, for example, which are analyzing the whole software and sometimes can take many hours, if not days, to complete. So yeah, thank you very much. And just to remind everyone that slides will be available. And I think this is almost it. I would like to thank both our speakers, my co-leaders, and the audience for attending this event. All the recording will also be available along with the slides. You can watch the recording on YouTube. And just to remind you how you can keep in touch with us, OWASP London chapter has a webpage on owasp.org. You can also follow us on Twitter. Please also like us on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, we're also on Slack on owaspslack.com. Our channel is chapter-London. We're also on Meetup and also on LinkedIn. And of course, you can watch all the recordings of all the past talks on YouTube. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time in January. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.